Our next talk is about to start. It is titled Introducing Ubuntu Core Desktop.
Hello, folks. Oh, that works. Yep, I'm Oliver. I'm the product manager for Ubuntu, which is quite a challenging task.
Uh,
Ken.
Ken VanDine, Engineering Manager, Ubuntu Desktop.
And today we want to spend a little bit of time sort of introducing you more formally to something that we're working on, which is Ubuntu Core Desktop. And sort of to put it into perspective a little bit, um, Ubuntu Desktop today has millions of users and with all sorts of different kinds of use cases. So you've got students, you've got gamers, you've got hobbyists, people learning web development for the first time, administrators, research scientists, and it gets even more complex because all those types of people are using Ubuntu Desktop in all sorts of kinds of organizations, from aerospace, fast food restaurants. You see Ubuntu Desktop in points of sale, things there, the VFX industry, education, and at home, which is probably where a lot of us use it as well. And so that is quite a large combinatorial matrix of personas that when we build a product like Desktop, we need to think about providing value to every time we iterate and improve each release. And so rather than target individuals or individual use cases, we think about these things in terms of values. We think about things like choice, hardware availability, HP, Dell, Lenovo, thinking about things like RISC-V, thinking about the Raspberry Pi, thinking about virtual desktops. Quality, I think, speaks for itself and something we keep driving to raise the bar on. Support, enjoyment, performance is something that we spend a lot of time on. One of the most important qualities of Linux is the way it brings out the most in your hardware. Privacy, security, these two things go hand in hand, and certainly recently with 2310, there's sort of different areas of the stack that we focus on to increase security, from our TPM-backed FDE to the way you manage PPAs, and then going further to think about the sort of enterprise management case in terms of how do you manage Ubuntu Desktop in a world where there are sort of different fleets of devices doing different things. And really the other thing is, like, how do we look to the future and how do these qualities manifest in different ways going forward? And I think with Ubuntu Core Desktop, this is a new kind of alternative way to experience Ubuntu that really plays up and emphasizes different parts of these things and delivers something unique to our existing matrix of users, but also the potential to broaden that appeal to an even wider audience. So, Ubuntu Core Desktop, what is it? So, it is an immutable, secure, and modular version of Ubuntu Desktop. And it's basically building on all of the work that we've done with Ubuntu Core in the IoT space that we've been building up over 10 years to extend that up to a full desktop experience. Now, when you think about that, that's a lot of work. There's a lot of different problems to solve. And so we're gradually building up that feature set over time, starting with things like thin client or single purpose use cases, extending to the home user, to the gaming experience. And then really our long-term goal is to build something really robust in terms of the developer experience, using things like LexD to have a container-based development workflow that still plays nicely and interacts with your host OS and the apps that you have on there. Ken, would you like to talk a little bit about how Ubuntu Core Desktop is built?
Sure. So one of the key things we had to think about when we were building this is we're not just building Ubuntu Core Desktop. We're building a series of components that people can use to build products out of, which we will, of course, build a product out of as well for Core Desktop. But we can think about enterprise use cases where an enterprise IT shop may need to build something that's custom for them, that has a set of apps that they need to deliver to their users. So we had to think about this in a modular approach, what all the little pieces we needed to go together here. So, some of the things that the key building block here is the boot base, which is actually Ubuntu Core. This is the root file system that the system boots. This is well proven. Ubuntu Core has been around for quite a while now. It's very robust. We had to build on top of that. Another component is the kernel, obviously. This is also delivered as a snap. We have a gadget snap, which is also another Ubuntu Core concept, which defines things like the bootloader, what the file system is going to look like, security settings, encryption, those sorts of things. And of course, snapd, this is what manages the entire system, right? And then, of course, applications on top of that, which these applications may require different bases because you may be running Spotify, which is built for Core 20, which is focal. Those sorts of things, right? So we had to have the ability that you can install any of these apps and they will just work. And then, of course, the Ubuntu desktop session, which is where you get your GNOME desktop session that you're used to using on an Ubuntu system. And we put all this together with a model. So there's a declarative mechanism to kind of define what goes in your system. And then that is signed, and there's a trust that's built in there because there's an assertion that says you have validated this is what you're giving to your users for security. Next. So a couple interesting things about this, like you can imagine being a snap. Many of you have probably seen snap channels and tracks and things like that, right? I'm not going to go into all those details, but you can imagine maybe you're a gamer. You install Ubuntu Core Desktop, and we have a gaming optimized kernel with some things turned on or what have you that you may be interested in having. We may not be shipping that by default to all of our users, but you could very easily switch to this gaming track for your kernel, and then your system is using this other kernel. Same thing with the desktop session. The desktop session provides a customized Ubuntu experience of GNOME, but maybe you want KDE. You could install KDE on your system, or there could be a KDE-based core desktop, or Budgie, or Mate, etc. So you could build your own solution by dropping in different ones of these components and get a different experience.
Yeah, and you even have things like with our different snap tracks, you can roll certain parts of your system, right? You could think about taking your desktop session, moving that to an edge channel, getting the latest updates, while everything around it continues to be robust and stable, right? So it's sort of pick your own adventure on some of the risk you want to take, depending on which aspect of the OS that you worry about. So these are some of the things that sort of to take that architecture and bring it down to earth. These are some of the things that I think make it very cool. Obviously the stability is hugely important, and I think this is a big factor of both quality and accessibility when it comes to helping users get to grips with the Linux. Our atomic updates mean that you either apply your update all at once or not at all, so you don't end up with this sort of partially updated state and have to go back and unpick those. And obviously, because it snaps, because they're confined, because they bundle their dependencies, you don't have to worry about conflicts when you're installing sort of different levels of software. With security, we're building on a whole bunch of stuff that Ubuntu Core has already started to develop, and starting to think about how we make that accessible in the desktop context. So we've got things like TPM-backed FDE, which we're also providing as an option in the sort of classic Ubuntu desktop experience. We've got things like Secure Boot, we've got recovery. Having that chain of trust really means that you know exactly what's on your system, and it's been signed, and it's replicatable. And if you're getting that version of Ubuntu Core Desktop, it's exactly the same as someone else's version of Ubuntu Core Desktop with the same model. And obviously, with the confinement of snaps, it means that if malicious software gets onto your system via an application, for example, then it cannot spread to other applications or your sort of base OS. The composability, I think, is really exciting. I'm not going to spend too much on this because I think Ken's already talked about it. But you can also think about you don't just have to switch and mix and match things. You can take stuff away. So if you really want something that is a pure single-purpose device, if you think about making a till experience or a digital signage type solution, and it's about which actual parts of that desktop experience do you actually need to deliver that, and only create the actual minimum device that you need to deliver that service. The manageability, so if you think about the administrator experience, like what they want is a fleet of devices that are consistent and similar and identical, and they don't have to worry about the quirks of individual machines. They don't have to worry about managing updates that didn't roll out over here but did over here. And because the updates are atomic and they can be rolled back, you can actually be more ambitious about rolling out updates, because if something goes wrong, you can roll that back. You don't have to then go back and unpick all of the dependencies that rollback has sort of left behind. Privacy, I think, as I said, goes hand in hand with security. There's a few things that we're working to build on around privacy, specifically with the Snap experience, not just for Core Desktop, in terms of how do you manage and grant permissions to snaps. And this is something that we're playing around with and exploring at the moment, making sure that the user is aware of exactly what their snap has access to and able to tune and tailor that going forward. And so, yes, really what we're creating here is extending the spectrum of Ubuntu Core, starting from that IoT use case. We already have sort of kiosks, single-purpose devices with things like Ubuntu Frame, which is based on Mir. But you can now start to go, okay, at some point, you might transition to a full sort of desktop stack over there. And I think as we start to build this out, we really want to end up with a sort of rich development experience in the same way you might use Ubuntu on, say, WSL, for example. Ken,
Yes.
have we made it yet?
Yes, Ubuntu Core Desktop does exist. We are not quite ready to release it on the world yet, but it's close. So it's not all business. We do enjoy using our computers. As many of you have probably seen, we have been delivering Steam as a snap now for about a year. Some of the reasons we needed to invest in that sort of thing is to make sure it works in this type of environment, right? Also make it as portable as possible and work on as many devices as possible. So some progress there. Native and Proton games do work on Core Desktop in the Steam Snap. Drivers well tested on Intel and AMD graphics. NVIDIA is not quite there yet, but we are working towards that. Some of the things that, well, I'll get to that in the TPM slide, actually. And of course, support for popular controllers, things like Xbox controllers, PS4 controllers, those sorts of things. Steam controllers just work. Productivity, got to be able to use your machine. I've actually been using mine as my daily driver. That's a good idea. So the camera works, mic works, audio interfaces all work. Bluetooth works. Use a Bluetooth mouse all the time. External displays, I have a dock at home I plug mine into, it works. Till, thank you, cups. Driverless printing just works. We still have a little bit of work to get all the things that may require proprietary drivers to work, but that's well in hand. Till's taking care of that stuff. We're in good shape. All right. So for the development experience, this is where we have a bit more work to do, but that's okay. We are including LXD by default, so you can spin up a container and do most of your development today. We already have that. We have a kind of a prototype user interface in front of LXD that lets you spin up a container, via a GUI that lets you choose any distro you want. If you want an Arch or whatever, it'll create it for you. It hooks up the GPU and all those sorts of things, mounts your home directory all seamlessly at startup, which is very nice. We don't quite have the ability to launch graphical apps in it yet. So like you can install a deb or VS Code as a classic snap, for example, in one of those containers, but we're not able to display that on the system yet, but we're getting there. We're also planning on doing some work with IDE integration. So if you want the VS Code experience, imagine the WSL type developer experience where you're running VS Code and it's executing stuff inside of a container. It'll be a very similar experience. So we're going to do some work there. We also want to deliver more terminals as snaps. So if you prefer to use, Terminator or Console or whatever your preferred terminal app is, we would like you to be able to kind of pick and choose. Right now we're limited to just one, but we need to do some work there to enable that because obviously developers have opinions on their editors and their terminals. Management. So we've got some really good progress here. We have some stuff we kind of got right out of the gate based on Ubuntu Core, immutability, and everything's confined, right? Because it's all snaps, read-only file systems, everything's contained. We do have TPM-backed full disk encryption. The reason it's marked as yellow here is because with Ubuntu Core, you can say you want to prefer encryption or the model must be encrypted, et cetera. And at install time, it just does it. What we want to do is enable that through the installer so you can say, I want to choose to encrypt or not at install time. And we don't have that yet. And the bit I mentioned on the NVIDIA slide back there is, we still have some work to do for delivering NVIDIA drivers in a way that will work in a FDE kind of environment. Snapshots, recovery, and factory reset, we just get that being based on Ubuntu Core. It's awesome. This is very robust, proven technology, and we have all that today. We're going to do some work with the landscape team to make sure you can manage fleets of these machines, create reports, see what your vulnerabilities are, those sorts of things, what kind of assets you have. And we also need to do some work for Active Directory login, kind of the enterprise use cases. When will it be available? So I mentioned, we're not quite ready for everybody to go out and use it. It is out there, but we need to do a little bit more work to get proper installable ISOs. Right now, we're still doing a little bit of installer work there. We want to set up some testing infrastructure. For classic Ubuntu, we have automated tests. When a new daily image is built, it runs through some automated tests before promoting that to the current. We need to get some of that stuff hooked up. We need to get some kind of release management practices in place for the various snaps that we depend on to control when those things go out to the stable channels and that sort of thing. And of course, we need awesome, awesome documentation. And we're going to work on that.
That's it.
That's it.
Do you want to do your and finally?
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Before we take questions, this presentation was done on Ubuntu Core Desktop.
We have 5 minutes to answer your burning questions. Let's hear them.
Hi. What's the commercial story about Ubuntu Desktop? For the regular Ubuntu Desktop, it's clear, free for the first 5 years, you pay for extended security maintenance. But for Ubuntu Core, it's quite different.
Yep.
What's that of Ubuntu Desktop Core going to look like?
I mean, I think the way that enterprise experience occurs with Core is specifically tailored to sort of that IoT use case. So I wouldn't imagine that would transfer across. I would prefer that we had a business model that was very similar to the classic desktop. I think, to be honest, it's early days here. Like, what our priority at the moment is to make sure that we can have a build that we can share with everybody here that allows you to do the things that you would expect to do from a desktop. What we don't want is to have a build that you sort of boot up, try, it sort of works, it sort of doesn't, close it again and come back to it in a year. We want to create a sort of minimum experience that people can really get the sense of what that's going to look like. I think going down the line, there will, we'll probably try and mirror the sort of classic desktop commercial experience. Some of those use cases are slightly different, though, right? If you're thinking about it in, say, a thin client use case, or in a kiosk use case, or in a point of sale scenario, then it's about what makes sense for those different purposes. And I'd probably less think about Core Desktop as a product offering and more as a set of tools to essentially build different types of products for different specific use cases. So, bit of a vague answer, I'm afraid, but when we have something that we feel delivers on that experience, then we'll articulate more on how we might deliver that in an enterprise scenario. Hello.
Will there be a cloud login required to use Core Desktop the way there is for Ubuntu Core right now?
No.
One other question, since that was so quick. You mentioned TPM-based full disk encryption, which kind of made my hackles rise because my only experiences with that have been with BitLocker on Windows, where updates are very likely to change the state of the TPM and require you to go desperately looking for a recovery key for your full disk encryption.
Yep.
Have y'all done anything to make the experience suck less?
Well, personally, I quite enjoy my BitLocker recovery key being backed up to my Microsoft Outlook account. There are some quality of life. Some I can't really talk to the difficulties of an experience like that. We are looking at different ways to manage your keys, and we're also making sure that this is one of the reasons why we put out a TPM FDE based option in 2310 is making sure that the architecture that we've put in place to avoid updates sort of changing the signatures and things like that from causing issues down the line. We really want to make something that's extremely robust in that instance, and we do need to be flexible to support updates and changes and essentially sort of reseal at that point. There's a few things we're working on at the user experience for individual users and the user experience for sort of enterprise users. How do you back up those keys? Where do you store those? Is something that we're sort of actively investigating and working on at the moment.
Oliver, you mentioned that something like a kiosk application might be typical. When I think of what power of a computer I need, a Raspberry would do. Are there any plans to port this also to ARM?
I would absolutely love to be able to have a Raspberry Pi based version of this. So that is something we're actively looking at. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to deliver that, right? We build snaps for ARM. We have an ARM-based desktop image for the Lenovo X13S. I would say that would be something that would be fantastic to be able to bring out when we release that sort of first developer preview. So that's something we're looking at. No promises. Certainly, I expect to deliver a Raspberry Pi experience of this, for sure. Anyone else? One at the back.
Loaded question. I understand this is built on snaps. Are there any plans to support alternate containerized application formats like Flatpak under Core?
No.
Yeah. I think
It
that-
wasn't a trick question. It was just an honest one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have containerized elements of the system. Containerizing within containers, it starts to become a little weird. Bear in mind though, one of the things that we want to do is have a LXD environment that's nicely mounted that allows you to install debs. At that point, you can install whatever you like as an Ubuntu container, right? So I'll leave it at that. There was a question at the back. Yes, hello.
Hi, are system images, like the core system images, reloadable without reboot?
Reloadable without reboot.
Reloadable. Oh, well, so when the
So
core,
is-
when I think what you mean is like the system needs to reboot to apply the update, right? Is that what-
Essentially, something like in NixOS, for example.
Yeah, so the base snap that I was talking about there, the boot base, when that gets updated, yes, a reboot is required because that is basically the OS level bit there. It is delivered that way. Ubuntu Core for like an IoT device is typically designed to automatically reboot when that automatically refreshes. We've done some work there to kind of prevent that. So if you're on a Core Desktop machine, you'll get a notification that there's a pending update that requires a reboot. And when you choose to reboot it, it will apply the update.
But it's worth thinking about, because of the modularity of the system, not every snap component needs to reboot to be updated. And so because the system is broken down into those snaps, it's only that base snap that's going to force the reboot. It's not the applications and things on top of that. So you don't have to, update for everything to preserve that immutability. Anyone else? We are sort of on time.
Yeah.
We spoke so fast and we had so many slides, but we did it. One more.
Will it support Canonical Live Patch?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know actually how that works with the kernel snap. They are. It's okay.
Well, then we shall certainly
Yeah.
have a look into that.
Oh, and actually, I forgot to give a shout out here. Alan Pope here has installed it on his Steam Deck, and that screenshot on my gaming slide was from his Steam Deck. And he did bring his Steam Deck here with Core installed on it. So Core Desktop running on his Steam Deck.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Ken has his laptop. Ping him if you want to have a go for yourself. And if you have any more questions, feel free to grab either of us. You see us wandering around for the rest of the weekend.
Yes, I have a dedicated test laptop, not just mine, that I brought with me for people to play around with. So find me. You can get your hands on it. You can install software on it, poke around, see what you think.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the weekend.